Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are trailblazers. This episode, Ariella Cohen Coleman opens her heart about grief, chronic illness, and the search for purpose. From losing her father to facing rare health challenges, Ariella's journey led her to build communities of healing and hope through Wellness Esquire and Chosen. Her story is one of resilience, faith, and turning pain into powerful advocacy. Let's dive in. Ariella, welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. It's so great to have you here. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really, really good. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm thankful that you invited me.
I'm so thankful you're here. I can feel your beach energy across the screen. I like to start off the podcast by asking people to share, what their childhood was like. I think it sets a really nice tone and explains the foundation of who we are today. And for some people, it's a direct correlation, and for other people, it's like we try to figure it out throughout the podcast. So can you share, what was your childhood like? Who was Ariella as a kid?
So I was very, very quiet.
Really?
Yes, which people wouldn't believe now, but it's true. I'm a twin, and I grew up in a house with parents that loved being Jewish. I went to a Jewish day school through 8th grade. I have memories of studying Rashi with my dad, as
nice.
a really little kid. And that was just, I loved it. We were a big part of the Jewish community. My dad and my parents were really central to our Jewish community. We were very, very lucky in a lot of ways in the way we grew up. We had a very loving household. I started to kind of be unclear about kind of my own place within Judaism and in the kind of religion. As I was getting older, my dad died when I was 17. He had cancer. And I really started to take a little bit of a break, frankly, from Judaism because I was just hurting so much. My dad was such a central part of our community. Ellie actually came to my home after his funeral, and which is not something I really shared ever before October 7th, but it's become very especially meaningful to me as I've thought about, what does it mean to be the kind of person that someone like Ellie would want to honor and show respect to his family. And so I really had many years of really taking a break from being an active kind of participant in Judaism until really it became very clear what I wanted to do with it around October 7th.
Yeah. Wow. I have a lot to say about this. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I think
Thanks.
Loss is always hard, but 17 is an age where people are particularly vulnerable, I think, because it's the teenage years,
Yeah.
And I also, when I was doing the research, I found a picture of your dad, he was learning something, or just such a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
So I would just
learning.
Yeah, so nice. I found it interesting that you said you were shy, because I think sometimes the people that end up finding the voice are the ones that were shy, and it's just about figuring out where does my voice matter, and then once you get that purpose, it's kind of like either you're still shy or you learn how to navigate through the shyness because your purpose is so strong. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess I still now I consider myself having been shy as a kid, but when I think more deeply about it, I'm not sure how really truly shy I was and how much I was actually just overwhelmed by the world. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm very empathetic. I feel things in a really, really big way. And it's still hard for me now with all the tools that I have, but as a tiny little person,
Yeah.
I mean, now my husband and I joke that, I feel things. I'm small and a petite 5'3" person.
Me too.
But my emotions. Oh, really? But I often feel like my emotions are designed to fit more of a 6 foot larger person, and so but they haven't really the size of my emotions hasn't changed since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I think I was really overwhelmed at how to process them and manage them, and I had a hard time with mean people and bullies and people who didn't seem to just do the right thing. So I just didn't really know what to do with this world. So it just seemed easier and safer to kind of observe and stay a little quieter and safer as I tried to figure out what's going on here? What is happening?
That makes so much sense. But then again, also as you get older, I think that's what makes people connect with you so well, because especially as you get more vulnerable and instead of turning inward, you share that with the world, people can connect to that versus pretending that everything's kind of which I used to do. I don't have emotions, I don't care, whatever. And you can't connect to people like that, right?
No.
So I think that it's also real strength as well if you learn how to deal with it.
And I have learned, I'm still learning, but as I get more comfortable with kind of taking ownership of how positive it is to feel in such a big way
Yeah.
and how to manage those emotions and feelings in a constructive way, I've really come to love it. You know, it's part of who I am, and it does allow me to connect with people in a way that, you know, I don't think others necessarily can. I'm often the person people go to for advice and for feeling heard, really.
Everyone wants that, right? It's so natural.
I think that's like probably one of the top things that all people
100%.
are looking for, is to be understood.
100%. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit more about the Judaism and how it affected you and changed now after October 7th. But something else that changed was your career choice. You wanted to go into fashion.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because when I was like 16, I also wanted to. I had an internship at Harper's Bazaar. And I had a similar thing also where I was looking for something with a little bit more purpose. What happened after your dad that made you reflect on that?
It's interesting when I think about it now. In the moment, you know, I was 17 when my dad died. My world fell apart in a lot of ways. I was a daddy's girl, and it really broke me. And because I feel so much, I felt like I've had this really horrible, awful experience. I have to help people with it. And a little more backstory to that was when I went to college, I was basically, if I wasn't in class, I was doing something with the American Cancer Society. As I was kind of processing what I had gone through and what I was going through, I realized how fortunate my family had been in terms of having the access to care. I grew up in Connecticut. My dad was able to go to Sloan in New York for his treatment. He had the #1 colon cancer specialist in the entire world. There were a lot of things around access and resources that allowed my dad to live 4 years longer than anyone really expected. I would have loved to have never lost him, but if it was going to happen, we really were fortunate in the way that it did. And I just felt like it shouldn't be so much worse for other people that are lacking the access and resources that we had. And so I just felt a responsibility. And at the time, I really didn't even know all of the ways that you could have an impact on the world. And because I was recovering and grieving and kind of a trauma state at the time, I don't think I was able to see a broader picture of, oh, I could also still like have a career doing something fun that I love. Yeah. That I'm just passionate about deeply, and also just build up a career and a life in which I have the funds and the resources and the connections to have an impact in another way. I just didn't know that. Since I did make that decision, I decided, okay, fashion is too frivolous for what I've been through. I need to do something important. And so I decided to go to law school, and not specifically with the intention of even practicing law. I wanted to develop the tools to become a really kick-ass advocate. When I think about it now in hindsight, I really didn't have a plan. I just needed to help people, and I needed to feel like what I'd gone through was going to help somebody.
I have to say, it's pretty amazing. A lot of people, when they lose somebody they care about or something really hard happens to them, they become bitter at the world. And it's hard to take that and try to turn it into like advocacy or helping people. And I think it's pretty amazing. It says a lot about you that that's where your brain went.
Thank you. You know, I feel like in the last handful of years, the concept of a gratitude practice has kind of become trendy for a good reason. Like there's science behind that. It's a good thing. But before it was trendy and anyone was really talking about it, I realized, we kind of did that in my family after my dad died anyways. I had so many conversations or so many times where, my mom and my sister and I would learn about someone else's family situation, family dynamics, and we would just go, like, how is it possible that we're the lucky ones? Wow. That can't be. We understood what we had, and then you look around and not everybody has that kind of very obvious love and support, and it's better to have that and lost it than to have not ever had that.
Wow. I feel a lot for you, and I truly, it's amazing.
Thanks.
How far you've come and what you've seen. I have a interesting question. Did your sister deal with things the way that you did?
My sister's a pediatrician, and she treats patients who have the complicated conditions that she and I have. So she's the doctor that we did not have growing up.
Wow.
So she's pretty awesome too.
Okay, that's amazing. That's actually a perfect segue. So let's talk a little bit about your health challenges.
Yeah.
This is so when I was just following you on LinkedIn, of course, we always see you're very vulnerable and you're showing a lot, but a lot of it is not shown. I think it's not possible to show everything. And so when I did the research into you and I went onto your site and looking into it, I was like, oh my God, wow, this person is just so much more than I thought. Okay, I cannot introduce it for you because there's a lot there. So I'm just going to let you take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. So I guess what I didn't even include in, the answer to your question of, tell me about your childhood.
Yeah.
It was a very happy childhood mixed with a lot of pain and complications, because not only was my dad diagnosed with terminal cancer when we were 13, but my twin sister and I started recognizing when we were around 8 years old some pretty unpleasant, I'll say, physical symptoms across the board. And, over time we ended up developing symptoms in head to toe, inside out, basically all organ systems. We just were a mess, but we were also kids with a very happy disposition and did well in school. But we started going to doctors when we were really young, and all of the kind of normal tests that the doctors knew to run would all come back saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with us.
Right.
So long story short, it took about a decade for us to get the first diagnosis, and then we, ended up getting quite a few diagnoses. And when we first started to get our kind of diagnosis collection around 18 or so, what we were being diagnosed with was deemed to be like truly rare diseases. And what we've learned over time is that they're not rare, they're just rarely diagnosed. When a condition or a disease is treated as rare, that means it's not really taught at all, or it's taught very, very little in med school. It doesn't really get funding, and medical professionals just are not educated in those conditions. We had a really tough journey of having, tremendous pain and all sorts of weird neurological symptoms, and injuries and problems with, digestion and swelling. And I mean, truly, you name a body part, you name an organ system, like we had symptoms. Eventually, around 18 years old, we got our first diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. We have the hypermobility type. There are other types. Then over the years, I added on POTS, which has now become somewhat more well known because a lot of people with long COVID are being diagnosed with POTS.
Oh, interesting.
Gastroparesis, which is basically your digestive system essentially does not work. It's effectively paralyzed. Mast cell activation syndrome, which is basically your mast cells, which are immune cells responsible for allergic reactions, they're defective. So you can, and I did, have allergic reactions.
Like anaphylactic
literally,
shock.
Yeah, literally, and to anything. But you're not technically allergic to these things, so it's not so simple as, if you have a peanut allergy, a true allergy, you go to the allergist and they can test you for it and you can discern, yes, I have a true peanut allergy, so you don't eat peanuts and you have an EpiPen. In the case with someone with MCAS, you can just have an allergic type reaction, but it can change, and it's not something you're going to test for.
That's so scary.
I didn't really understand how scary it was until I started to get better and had the time and space to recognize.
Yeah. You were in survival mode, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Most of my life was survival mode, which
Wow.
I, only started to process a handful of years ago. The mast cell condition was diagnosed when I was a first-year law student. Probably one of the most important diagnoses that I got, especially with what I was experiencing at the time. But still, I have to tell you, being diagnosed with that as a 1L, tough.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I started out being misdiagnosed, but I started out basically my law school experience just blacked out all the time, and I was having trouble eating food and staying alert, and I was swollen all the time and everything hurt. And in this still misdiagnosis phase before actually being diagnosed with that, which answered a whole lot of questions, I was admitted to the hospital because they had tried to treat me as an outpatient for a thing I didn't have. And I had such a crazy reaction that the outpatient clinic basically said to the doctors, we don't send her here. We are not equipped for the likes of her. If you want to try treating her for anything, you're going to have to admit her. So they did that. And then the rescue and revive team had to be called after I did not die. I stayed up writing a brief until around 3 a.m. that was due the next day. So that's how I spent my first year of law school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't even know what to say to this. Because I don't think... Part of me is like, I cannot believe you pushed through it. And part of me is like, I'm so sorry you had to push through it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm amazed, and also, like, people shouldn't have to push themselves that hard. I know you were in survivor mode, but now, like, looking back, people who have things like that, sometimes you can feel crazy because... It's almost like the world doesn't believe what you're going through.
Oh, it's not almost. It is exactly that. I'm now, which we can get back to, I'm now feeling healthy for the first time in my life. So a lot of how really, truly horrendous most of my life was in a health-related way it actually feels in the past now. So it's no longer like the immediate thing on the front, of my mind. So yeah, I mean, certainly for the first decade or so where we had no diagnosis at all, and we were my mom, first of all, we were very fortunate in that my parents always believed us. We didn't have to convince our parents of anything. And in fact, even my own understanding that something was wrong is because of my sister, because I'm such a push through type of person. And when you're only yourself, you don't know what it's like to be someone else. So I didn't even understand that what I was experiencing was pain or discomfort or whatever it was. I was just like, this is what it is to be a human. And so there were, starting from a really young age, my sister would say to my parents, this part of me hurts, or this feels like this, or, this is happening. And I'd be like, yeah, me too. So what? And my parents would have to be like, sweetie, that's pain. That's not good. And if you feel that, you should tell us.
It seems so natural.
Right. Not at all. You can see why one of us became a doctor and the other maybe did not. So for starters, we were very fortunate that we didn't have to then convince our parents that something was wrong, because a lot of kids have to do that too. And, my mom was just taking us to, doctor after doctor, trying to find someone to believe us. It became even easier for doctors to say, oh, you're just depressed and crazy because your dad is so sick. And there's nothing actually wrong with you. You're just, you're looking for attention, or you're struggling. And we're like, nope. First of all, note the timeline, but also what? No. So that was really upsetting and really painful. And there were also doctors who blamed, my mom for causing us to think we had these things.
Like Munchausen disease?
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it stems from doctors, not every single one, but many of them being very not okay with acknowledging that they don't know something.
Right.
And so it's much better for them to say, oh, you're just crazy, or there's nothing wrong, rather than to say, gee, I haven't seen this before. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's in every aspect of life. We all do that,
absolutely. Right? Absolutely. I mean, I remember when we first got our Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, which was our first diagnosis, I remember thinking, now we have an answer. People will stop saying this, to us. People will stop saying, oh, you're depressed and crazy and nothing's really wrong with you. And I remember the first time after having received the diagnosis and then still being told by a doctor that we were nuts. And I was like, wait, I thought that was going to make this part stop. And I can assure you it really did not, even many years later. I've got loads of stories around this. I did at one point get a doctor fired for it.
You did? Wait, so that gets me into your work now, like your Wellness Esquire membership. Can you talk to me about that? I know, thank God you're feeling better, but you're doing a lot of amazing work in the health field.
Yeah.
Can you share?
Absolutely. I guess taking a little bit of a step back, I found what I consider to be science-based magic about 3 years ago, and it's called neuroperformance training, and it completely changed my life. Yeah. I found this when I was really, really sick, just trying to find something else that I hadn't tried before, because anything I had tried before hadn't been good enough and it wasn't working. I found a trainer who does neuroperformance training, and I started working with him, and what he does is basically athletic training for the nervous system. And I kind of think of it as, if you're combining like every possible form of physical therapy and vision therapy and vestibular, which is your balance system therapy, and performance coaching, it's that. And so he does it in the most comprehensive way. It's all anatomy and neurology based. And one of my favorite things about the way he works is, and he works with everyone from Parkinson's patients to professional athletes. And regardless of who he's working with, he works with you as if you're an athlete whose performance he's trying to optimize, rather than you being a patient he's trying to make less sick or less injured. And to me, that philosophical difference is so critical. So I started working with him about 3 years ago, and after one session, I was like, I was so blown away at how much better I felt in a number of ways. I have notes from the impact of the first, month or two. This not only got me out of the horrendous stage, but started to, my vocal range increased on both ends. Really? After one session. My balance, my ability to walk comfortably and stably and holding something heavy, walking down the stairs. I no longer have digestive issues. I no longer take meds. I mean, I used to be on,
amazing.
I can't even tell, I mean, dozens of pills every day. I take nothing anymore. So it just, I mean, I no longer, my 20 plus years of chronic pain went away. The crazy acute stuff went away. My organ system started just working properly. And it's a customized approach to just training your nervous system, essentially to understand what is going on and to train you to be able to understand the inputs that you're getting. And there are certain things that, just because of the way I was born genetically, like someone else might not struggle with certain things that I do, just because of the way I was born. So there are certain things that are kind of just suboptimal with my, the construction of my body, basically. And so because of that, my nervous system just has all these extra kind of confusions that it's just like, I don't know what to do with that, that sound and that light and the movement over there and the fact that you're moving your foot and like, is that your foot? Is that, someone with EDS will understand like these things that I'm saying, and someone else is like, well, of course that's your foot. What does that mean? And now I'm at the phase where, I just get to optimize everything and feel better and better. I am very fortunate to be able to work with someone. And I think, you're always going to get the best approach by working with someone who gets to work one-on-one with you. But a lot of the things that we do, anyone can do. And a lot of these things, all you need is your body. You don't even need to go out and buy anything. And so when I started to notice the benefits of this so quickly, I started posting some of the exercises that I would do on social media, and I would get messages from people from all around the world. There's a Nova survivor who's become very dear to me. And when we were in Israel last month, I met up with her. She had told me already, she texted me in the morning that she was really struggling, and it was very clear when I saw her that was true. I mean, you could just see it on her face and in her eyes. She was just not okay. And we talked for a while, and I asked her if she wanted to try something, and she said yes. And I showed her a couple of my exercises, particular things that help with interoception, which is basically your ability to understand and interpret what you're feeling inside. Some of the exercises are like 15 seconds, 30 seconds.
Wow.
In 15 seconds, the first one, I watched her go from just like flat and just on the verge of tears and just trying to smile, but you could tell everything was just, again, like pushing through. I watched her just turn from flat and pained to sunshine.
Wow.
And she just like started laughing, and a real genuine smile like came out, and I watched her change, and she felt it, and we did some more, and she just came to life. I mean, it was incredible.
That's
so
amazing.
I've started to send her videos of some of these things. The exercises that I showed her are things that, I'll do when I'm feeling anxious about something. And often I've noticed that when I'm feeling anxious, part of what that means for the way that kind of my brain and body operate is I don't feel myself well. And I'm kind of feeling disconnected from my body. And for me, some of that stems from the Ellis Syndrome, because part of what's happening there is, I mean, I kind of, if you think about the construction of a house, like you want your house to be constructed on a very solid foundation.
Yeah.
When you have Ellis Syndrome, your foundation isn't solid. So your collagen, which is meant to be like tightly latticed like this, is loosely latticed like this. It can lead to a lot of injuries. It can lead to, that's the thing that's holding your organs together. There are a lot of things that I've learned to do that help with my proprioception, which is my awareness of kind of where I am in space, more of in an external way. And so the interoception part is the internal. We're born into these really complex mechanisms that no one teaches us how to use. I've started to finally learn how to use this thing. And people often ask me, like, how are you able to do so much? Some of it's just the way I'm built. I'm very driven. But a lot of it is, well, I've got a really good toolbox.
Wow.
And so, so I kind of had paused because of bandwidth for a while, sharing those videos on social. I'm getting back to it, and I have a plan for that.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, because of the impact that I love hearing from people from all around the world saying, like, it changed my life in this way. And, I hear this from people from all ages. I think the youngest has been, 9.
Wow.
I mean, there was a 9-year-old who found me via her mom, who has some of the conditions that I have. And it was when she saw my videos, it was the first time she felt not alone and not like a weirdo. And also like, oh, this doesn't have to define my life in a negative way,
Yeah.
and I can get stronger, and there's like I can do this.
Yeah.
You asked about the Wellness Esquire, so this all gets into that because we all need these kinds of tools, and across industries certainly, but I think in certain ways in law especially, we are just not in tune with ourselves, and the industry in a lot of ways can be harmful for lawyers and legal professionals. And I spent, I was very open always about my health in a personal capacity, and also through law school. And then once I started my career, I started to be pretty tight-lipped about it because I had been explicitly told not to tell anybody about my health.
Really?
And
by like the law firm?
by a lawyer. No, actually, when I was a college intern working for a lawyer.
Like what? Like this will not come across very professional?
So I didn't even get an explanation really, but at the time I was such a rule follower, I didn't even think about and I was so scared of having kind of said the wrong thing, and I was very mindful when I had brought it up to him because at the time I was having trouble with eating and I had all these food restrictions, and I thought gave me an opening. He said something about, I don't know, a hip thing. I forget now. It's so long ago. I think he had like a whole hip thing and a surgery and a something or other going on. And I was like, oh, maybe I can use this as an opening to say something about, hey, all these business lunches that we do, I have some food restrictions. So if we could maybe keep this in mind for where
like
we
advocating
choose
for
to
yourself.
Go. Yeah. And his response was, don't tell anybody in a professional context you have a health. And I was like, oh, okay, noted. Most of the law school professors and admin were very supportive. I also had a professor who, actually, the story that I told you about, I almost died, and then after I didn't die, I stayed up.
So casually, you're saying that.
Yeah,
the story.
When I got back to school, the professor's response was, maybe law school's not for you. Look, I was also getting, when I graduated from law school, I received an award for grit. So there were also positive messages, but we need a lot more positive messaging to balance out the negative.
Absolutely.
And so the really negative ones stuck with me and also scared me because
but you didn't quit, and a lot of people
would quit. No, I did not quit at all. I kept my health story to myself, even though that was often part of why I was doing the work that I was doing, and it was relevant. And it was part of me being, an advocate and understanding parts of the industry. I got a concussion early on in my career, and I tried to push through it. And that didn't go well. It was the first time I'd ever been unable to push through something. Yeah. And so, for one thing, I kind of had an identity crisis. Wow. Because I was just like, who I am is a person who can push through anything. Who am I if there's a thing I can't push through?
Wow.
I had to take time off of work, and I was really terrified to do that because I didn't want anyone to think that I was weak. I wasn't where I, wanted to be yet in my career. I was worried about how that would impact my ability to climb the ladder. Yeah. And also, by the way, like climb the ladder to a, success that it wasn't even what I wanted.
Oh, that's so relatable.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so this is what led to the Wellness Esquire. This phase of being essentially forced to take a pause where I just, was kind of bored out of my mind, unable to work. And it was a really bad concussion. I was not able to do anything. My husband would come home and from work and just, find like a new pile of books on the floor that I had tried to organize, but that became too exhausting and had to give up. So that would cue him into how the day had gone. But this forced pause ended up being one of the best things that could have happened to me because it led me to a couple things. One, it led me to start reassessing what I was doing and remember, wait a second, why did I go to law school in the first place? What are my goals? Wow. What am I trying to achieve? Am I on the right track? Am I headed in the right direction? Am I doing what I set out to do? And also, do I still even want to do what I set out to do? And so it kind of started me on this path of having a series of questions that I would regularly check in with myself about, which has evolved into having all these questions around values and priorities and lifestyle. And also in that time period of recovering from the concussion, I started working with a neurologist who incorporated certain mindfulness and kind of just well-being oriented protocols into his whole, concussion recovery program. And at the time, I was living in DC and, I'm very kind of stereotypically type A perfectionist workaholic. And I was just like, okay, I don't know what this whole like mindfulness and meditation and whatever you're talking about, but I will try anything to get back to work. And then it started helping.
Interesting.
And not just with like improving the concussion symptoms, but also as I, started to get back to and by the way, this wasn't like in a week. I wish I could have found neuroperformance training in that time because it would have expedited the process. But it started to open my eyes up to, wow, when you're not totally stressed out all the time and you're actually taking the time to sleep and rest and take care of yourself, you can actually perform even better. Isn't that
right?
Crazy?
No one tells you that.
And that kind of began to shift what I was doing in my career. And it also helped me acknowledge that I could do many things in my career. Wow. I don't think we tend to have a lot of examples in law or probably elsewhere of someone doing like a bunch of different things, either having multiple careers totally unrelated, one after another, or doing a bunch of different things at one time. Yeah. But I'd gotten kind of stuck in like, well, this is what lawyers that, in the field that I'm in do, and this is how it looks, and this is what success looks like. And I started to lose track of the other things that I was interested in. That phase reminded me of how creative I was. I didn't have enough free moments to feel creative. Your brain can't be creative when it's busy nonstop. Yeah. So being forced to be bored helped me to remember, I'm a creative person. Wait, what are all of the things that I could do? And how do I do that? And let's start. So that's what then led to the Wellness Esquire, because I started to realize that what I was finding that I needed for myself, I didn't know where to find other people. Yeah. And I felt like, kind of the oddball out talking about things related to well-being. Yeah. And, and I didn't want anyone to think that like, I'm talking about well-being and therefore I'm not driven. Because we also have a culture of like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And yes. It's like discovering that wasn't a great plan. One of the hardest things I think for me to kind of transition through, and I imagine I know a lot of people go through this as well, when you've used one approach to get through your whole life and it's worked for you, how do you then go to something else? Yeah. So the push through every single challenge approach I've been successful through that. That's what had gotten me through. And I had a lot of things that I've done, I've pushed through that I look back and I'm like, that probably wasn't a healthy and safe decision. But it also is what led me to graduate from college and law school. And
literally the last 10 minutes just packed with wisdom. I have to say, one thing that I find so interesting about you is that I have not experienced any of the health challenges or the things that you've experienced. However, I kept smiling and nodding because I was relating to everything you were saying in my own version, right? Yeah. Like COVID was my concussion, right? Where I was so focused on one career that I forgot I know how to draw. I forgot I know how to ride horses. Yeah. I forgot how to have any creativity because I was so focused on this one thing. And then during COVID, I almost was given the opportunity to rediscover all this stuff. But then I had a crisis where I'm like, do I just not know what I want to do? Because I was doing 8 different things. Yeah. So I experienced that as well. And it's only now where I'm learning that I can have all these different interests and be all these different things and still be me, as opposed to like, which one am I? So I can so relate to what you're saying.
Well, you're a multifaceted human.
Yeah, but no one tells you that's okay.
No, absolutely. That is really a big part of why I've started to be so open about who I am and what I do, because a lot of this stuff seems so, far-fetched because we just don't talk about it.
I know.
We connected on LinkedIn because of my Israel advocacy, and I've had a lot of people since October 7th reach out to me and say, you're so brave for posting about Israel. Yeah. And, and all the anti-Semitism stuff and all that stuff. And it doesn't feel brave at all. For at least, a couple of reasons probably, but I think primarily, or starting with, because my LinkedIn career started during COVID. I think my first post, at least my first impactful post, in my perspective, was about being an attorney with, quote unquote, rare and complex chronic health issues. And I posted about it because I never doubted that I'd be able to do whatever I set out to do. Mm-hmm. But it would have been really nice to have known another attorney who was going through all this stuff with some health challenges. My classmates could not relate at all.
Right.
And so I posted because it was eating me up to not be so open about all of me. I just needed to put it out there because I wanted other people to know that they're not alone. But it felt like a terrifying thing to do because of the stage of career that I was in. And, I now have my own law firm, but at the time I didn't even have that in mind. And so, I thought, like, is this going to make me unemployable? Are people going to think I'm crazy? And now I don't care.
Love it.
But I wanted to be that person for someone else if they needed it. Yeah. And I immediately was so glad that I posted because I posted and then I was just was flooded with messages from people with their own stories.
Like the bystander effect? Like if let's say there's an accident, everyone thinks the person standing next to them is going to do something, right? And so we don't do anything. Yeah. And it's kind of the same with speaking up. Like all of us are secretly going through these things but we're always waiting for somebody else to be the first one to talk about it, and it just doesn't happen.
Yes.
Right?
During COVID, I started hosting virtual chit-chat check-ins. It was an opportunity for lawyers and law students to just come together and say the real stuff. I would watch people just come to life when they discovered that the thing that made them feel different was not unique.
Yeah, right.
And that was one of the experiences that I had also when I posted that first post, and I was like, at the time I was thinking, well, clearly no one experiences exactly what I experienced because, attorneys no one was talking about being an attorney with health stuff.
It's crazy.
And so I felt like my story must be very, very unique. And then I discovered like, oh yeah, sure. Like the details and sometimes my diagnoses made me, a little bit more unique, but also I can't even tell you how many attorneys or law students who have reached out to me with the same diagnoses.
Really?
Or with the same what I have is not rare. They're just,
That's crazy.
Yeah. One of the people who reached out on, right after I posted was a law student who had just been diagnosed with a rare brain tumor.
Wow.
And she was in this phase of just thinking, like, can I do this? Mm-hmm. How the hell can I do this? And so we spoke and we've been in touch since. And
so amazing.
The answer was, yes, you can. Your path may look a little bit different. And that's totally fine. But yes, you can absolutely do this. You mentioned before that you kind of had your own, you can't relate to the details, but the gist of it.
Exactly. The themes are the same, right?
Well, we're all humans.
But I think, again, why I'm talking to you today is because a lot of us have these feelings. A lot of us want to do something about it, and most of us don't. And what I find amazing about you is that almost everything you've been through, starting from our conversation with like switching your dream career from fashion to law, is you take what you go through and you want to help people with it, or you want to do something impactful with it, which takes us a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your advocacy post October 7th. How did that come about? And I also want to connect it back to full circle. After your dad passed, your connection to Judaism, or like where you fit in, was a little bit unclear to you. And you recently put a post out where it's kind of like it's all starting to make sense again. Like the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit again. So I'd love to just tie it all into a beautiful bow.
Love a nice bow. Yeah. As we talked about, after my dad died when I was 17, I just, going to services was painful. So people assumed my dad was a cantor or a rabbi because he was so knowledgeable, but he was not. He was a systems engineer with a PhD in AI, but he just loved this stuff. After he died, I was like, what's up with this whole Judaism thing if my dad could die? Right. And there were also a number of other parents within just a couple of weeks, actually, who died before my dad, also far too young, of other friends in our kind of Shabbat group. And so I just was like, what's the point of the Mishaberach, prayer if they die? Yeah. And if you can be like this kind of a tzaddik and then you're the one who dies, like what the hell is all of this? And it hurt. I couldn't go to services without hearing his voice. And I needed a break. Over the years, as I was getting older and when I met my husband, I was still trying to kind of figure out, like, where do I fit in? And really never thought about my identity as a Jew. I never really thought about my identity at all. I knew I was Jewish. I was never like, I never like renounced it, or I just, didn't really thought very deeply about it. when October 7th happened, so my mother-in-law is Israeli, her family is there, we have a lot of friends there. And also after October 7th, I, suddenly found out how many of my friends have family there that, we never talked about it, but we're Jews. We got people there. And so October 7th, I was just a paralyzed mess. And, we're receiving pictures from our family in Israel of, in their safe rooms. And October 10th, this friend of mine learned that his cousin had been murdered at the festival. I spent a lot of that Tuesday on the phone with this friend. And it kind of took me out of my paralysis mode and brought me back into my resilient mode. And I realized, I had this, multi-hour long conversation with this friend. It was such a painful conversation. And yet I felt more functional afterwards.
Interesting.
And it kind of led me to realize, I'm a person who tends to retreat and go quiet when I'm not okay. And that's not resilience. That's not going to help me. That's not going to help anyone, but I bet other people are going to do that too. And because I have this business with the Wellness Esquire, I already had the awareness of like, hey, lawyers are, we tend not to do so great with our, mental health and emotional health and kind of taking care of ourselves. October 7th is certainly not going to help Jewish lawyers. So I started out just thinking, okay, I'll host, some well-being oriented Zooms for Jewish lawyers so that we can all be not okay together. And then it started to expand into virtual events, not well-being oriented, just different kinds of education, just different ways of bringing people together and, coordinating volunteers, coordinating attorneys, and what are we going to do with all the stuff going on, with anti-Semitism on campuses and who can help and in what way. And, in just the first couple of days after October 7th, I was scouring the internet to try to find the one place I could look to find everything I needed to know. And whether it was, where should I donate? How do I volunteer? Just all of the things. And I wasn't finding what I was looking for. So as I found resources, I just curated them and posted them on at the time, the Wellness Esquire website. As I was also posting a lot on LinkedIn and then directing people to my curation of resources, because there was a lot of action items. It was, different ways for people to kind of just help from their couch. So then other people were directing people to the resources I was gathering. And with the way that I was posting, people seemed to think that I, had some answers. My inboxes just started to overflow. I was getting kind of 3 categories of messages. I was getting a lot of questions of like, this thing is happening to me. What do I do? Where do I go for help? I was getting a lot of people reaching out who wanted to help in different ways and didn't know how. And then a lot of messages, just, different forms of like, thank you for posting, I'm feeling so lonely and, just loss of hope, and your posts are making me feel inspired and like, there's hope and we've got this and, like I'm part of something. And I was really going nonstop. And I was very tired. And it's all, it's emotionally, I was just wiped. People were reaching out to me with every horrible thing you can imagine. Either just because this was what their kid or they were going through and they needed help and they didn't know where to go, or they just wanted me to know every horrible thing that's happening in the world because I'd become kind of a prominent voice. And they, so I was getting all these tags of,
that's a lot.
It's too much. So when we reached last March, I was in a reevaluation period because I was frankly, even with all of my awareness around burnout and well-being and, that you need to take care of yourself in order to be productive and effective, I was burnt out. And so I was trying to take a step back and just assess like, okay, so the hostages are still not home. I have not solved global anti-Semitism and I'm very busy, but am I even accomplishing anything? Because if not, like, this has to change. And even if so, this has to change. So there were 2 primary things that happened in that reevaluation period. One was I already at the time had a list of small Israeli businesses and other pro-Israel businesses and directories put together by all other volunteers. Someone behind one of those directories, which again was volunteer organized, contacted me and said, thanks so much for posting our directory here, but we're all volunteers and have to actually get back to work. And so we're taking it down. And I thought, oh no, but we're all volunteers and we're all burnt out and we all have actual jobs that we have to get back to, but the need for this is only growing. Okay, I'll take yours down, but like, what are we going to do about this? We have to make this sustainable, and it is currently not.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened in that time, a 22-year-old Nova survivor entered the U.S. to share her story of surviving at schools. And she was improperly detained and about to be improperly deported at the Houston International Airport by some very anti-Semitic immigration officers who made it very clear to her that the reason was because they did not want her sharing her story of surviving Hamas. And because she was very pretty, people would be inclined to believe her. And they said a bunch of other really
Oh my God.
horrible things. Before they confiscated her phone, she was able to contact somebody. A family member of hers had been following me on LinkedIn and reached out for help.
Wow.
And amazingly, out of all of the messages that I receive and don't see when they come in, I saw this one. I posted to LinkedIn the little bit that I knew. We learned very quickly from immigration attorneys that there was nothing they could do at this point. We were going to need some very high-level help if we were going to have any chance of resolving this. As soon as I posted, I was just bombarded with people from all over the place trying to help.
That's so special.
There were members of Congress that were trying to help. We had consuls trying to help. Everyone failed. We probably had like 7 or 8 hours to resolve this whole thing. About an hour before she was about to be deported, the right person that I didn't know was going to be the right person saw my post and was able to quickly move mountains. Resolve this doesn't feel like quite the right word because it was, it was still so painful and it was awful, but effectively resolve it. It was, she was not deported. So that experience made me go, I guess I'm achieving something, because out of dozens, truly dozens and dozens of people who tried to help, everyone failed except for me. And not because of me, I just happened to know the right person. But the role of, triager and director is key. And that's really been a lot of the role that I've played, is just in directing people to the resources that they need. So then the question became, how do we make this scalable and sustainable? Yeah. And so what that is all turning into is Chosen. I just launched the very, very early MVP, very kind of prototype level at this point. Chosen is designed to effectively answer the questions that everybody has reached out to me needing answers for. It's meant to be the place that people, Jews and allies from all around the world, go to find each other and develop productive and meaningful relationships and to find the information and resources that they need. Whether that's, anything in the anti-Semitism category, whether you've dealt with something or someone is dealing with something and you don't know what to do. The goal is something happens, you go to Chosen. It's not meant to be just a static list. Because the impact that I've been able to have since October 7th is only because of people. And the more we know each other, the more we can help each other. Have you heard of Ramy Davidian?
Yes. Through you.
Through me. Great. Yes. Ramy is an Israeli farmer. He grew up very close to the Nova site and he's lived there his whole life. So he knows that area very, very well. He saved, along with his family members and members of his village, 750 people from Nova. He went repeatedly in and out of that whole area where people were being murdered. He just kept going. It started out with his best friend called him in the morning when no one really knew what was going on yet, but the sirens had started to go off. His best friend called him and said, my son's at that party, go help him. And Ramy's wife was like, what are you, crazy? The sirens are going off. That means you don't go anywhere. But Ramy's best friend had called him and said, go help my son. So he was going to go do that. There's so many unbelievable aspects to his story. The part that I routinely repeat for people, because I don't think I'll ever really be able to process this. Once people found out he was going in and out and back in to save kids, everybody had his number. So he was receiving thousands of WhatsApp messages from, parents saying, please go save my kid. This is what they look like. This is where they are. So he was on his way to go save one young woman in particular. By the time he arrived to her, she'd already been captured. So he's just started speaking to the terrorists in Arabic and convinced them that he was Bedouin and that he was, on their side, and that Israeli security forces were just a couple minutes away. They were on their way, and that it'd be better for him to take the girl. And
So
it
smart.
worked. And that's how she got home safely. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That's like a film, right? That's a movie. That's
Yeah, his whole story is so remarkable. I met him when I was in Israel in April, and then when I was there in January, I got to introduce him to a group of lawyers that I was with. The first part of my trip was through an organization called Israel Tech Mission.
Wow.
And so Ramy got to share his story with them, and he shares his story, a lot of the time. So when I met him in April, I'd been invited to hear him share his story at an event. It was a question and answer portion at the end, and I raised my hand at the end and asked, how can people help you? And his friend, who I didn't know I'd been sitting next to the whole time, sprung up and grabbed the mic and said, send him money. He needs money.
Wow.
He's not able to work right now. So I spoke to him afterwards and said, well, send me the GoFundMe. I'll send it around. And there wasn't one. So now there is. I created it. For those of us who don't live in Israel, even though we're so devastated about what happened, and even if we're attached to the news and trying to follow and we really, really care, there's a lot that's going on with the individual humans that we're still often disconnected from.
Yeah.
And Ramy's not able to work right now. It's not just that he ran in and out of this festival site area to save as many people as he could. I don't know how grotesque you want to get into things on the podcast, but
whatever is the truth, we want to hear it.
He was putting body parts together. Wow. He saw things that, most of us, even if we're looking at the most grotesque things that you can see, on social media, but most stuff is going to be blocked. He saw that with his, eyes. He saw what really happened to people. He's not okay. He's a man who's, I would say, full of sunshine. I mean, he's so optimistic and so gentle. And so, you can only imagine the kind of person who's going to risk their own life to save that many people. It's really taken a tremendous toll on him, and it's incredibly traumatic. And so he was going through very extensive trauma treatment, which that on its own isn't cheap, and he also has to live. But he's not able to work right now because he's traumatized. But Absolutely. The reason I raised this story in the context of Chosen was, certainly it was one of the things that led to it, but also Israelis are connected in a way that I think Israelis don't even tend to realize, because it's just part of their fabric of being Israeli. As soon as people who are part of the Nova scene, learned that he was going in, everybody knew he was the person to contact. I've never had an Israeli, say, gee, I wonder how people even knew how to find him. I've only had Americans say to me, well, how did people even know to find him? How did they know who, And that's because Jews outside of Israel are disconnected. We're too fragmented. And I want Chosen to be really the solution to that. We need each other. The impact comes from working together and having a very we're all in this together mentality.
I love it. And I love that at the end you started using the word connected a lot, because when you started talking about your work, I was thinking, okay, she's a connector. That's what she does. And also I just want to honestly say thank you so much for the work you're doing. Honestly, we need people like you. And I even though the person, it's kind of like the word shliach, like a messenger. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really what you are, because it's you're the person who ended up being able to get the girl out. Okay, that wasn't you, but that person would never have known about her if not for you, right?
Yep.
So yeah, thank you so much for what you're doing. Another thing that is really impressive is that a lot of people who would have gone through the things you've been through would become victims. And not that there's anything wrong with being a victim, but to stay in the victimhood is sad, and
it's not productive.
Exactly. And what you did is you're turning it into something productive. You're helping people, and that's very admirable.
Thank you. I think that's somewhat natural for me, but I think I've also developed that skill. I think it's important to grieve and to acknowledge when things really suck, and a lot of things really suck.
Yes,
there's a lot of pain. Part of my push through approach, which has kind of led a lot of my life, has been okay, that was terrible. What are we going to do? How do we turn this into something productive? And so, in fact, I think, I haven't always actually allowed for all of the time to grieve, but it's actually something that I've started more recently to pay attention to, because it does end up catching up to you sometimes. I think I have a default mode to productivity.
You can use that default mode for, sticking to law and that's beautiful, but you're using it for so much more than that, right? And that's still something that's admirable, you know?
Thank you. You know, we talked earlier about being multifaceted. I mean, especially in this post-October 7th period, I've had more and more people kind of telling me what they think of me, which is, it's helping me to actually understand what people get out of me. And because I'm just me, I haven't always been aware of like, you know, necessarily how people perceive me and what I offer. So I'm listening to that and recognizing where I can have the biggest impact. You know, I'm an excellent lawyer and my clients love me. But there are also other excellent lawyers. And to be honest, in my legal practice, what makes me especially good at what I do is because of I really care. There's also a limitation when you're just working in a very client-oriented business with how broad the impact can be. I mean, and a lot of my clients are very mission-oriented businesses, so I can help them implement whatever they're looking to do and make sure that they have the legal framework to do it properly. So in that way, I get to have a broader impact. But the more I understand from people what they get from me, the more I'm like, okay, so if one of my goals in life is to, you know, as kind of cliche as this sounds, just make the world a healthier, happier, safer, kinder place, then what are all of the ways that I can really have that impact? So I like to think if I can have these different, you know, kind of venues through the Wellness Esquire and through other things and through Chosen and through EDS, etc., which is where I have sort of my health and wellness journey.
Yeah, there's so much we didn't even touch upon that we can talk about.
But if I can help people through those platforms and other things that I do to live better and to show up as better versions of themselves, then to me that's like the way that I get to actually have the impact on the world that we really, really need.
Yeah, we really, really do need that. And thank God we have people like you. I really could talk to you all day. However, I do end off the podcast by asking everybody the same question, which is, what does being a trailblazer mean to you?
Being a trailblazer means being able to tune out the noise and tune into what you know needs to happen and doing something that no one else is doing that ends up being totally game-changing.
Yeah. So you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here and like sharing your story and being so vulnerable. When you can relate to somebody in such a vulnerable way, I think it gives people strength. And I know like people who are going to listen to, everyone's going to be able to take away something from your story and your work, right? It's going to, in some way, it's going to impact their life. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.